My daddy's birthday's today.
How was the wedding?
It's great. It's great. I've never been to a wedding catered by Chick-fil-A before. It's nice.
Did you?
No, actually, I did the blessing. But it was great. My brother gave a speech. It was pretty good. I was the only one other than my brother who was able to speak. Nobody, he wouldn't let anybody else get up there. He didn't trust him.
I'm here. Thank you. Oh, that's it.
You are. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the donuts. I think Ben and Diane brought those in. So, donuts. Yeah, donuts.
No, without the S.
Without the S. So I really am excited about that. I say, everybody raise your donuts, you know. Awesome. So it's good to be back. We, of course, were out of town because of my brother's wedding. Had a great time. It was a lot of fun. He and I have a lot in common. We're pretty simple creatures. So he had Chick-fil-A cater my dad and my stepmom had never had Chick-fil-A before.
Wow.
That was like I said. I've heard a lot of miracles, but that's like, how do you live in this? But anyway, so and I don't know if you're familiar with Andy's frozen custard. So if you get like north of Arkansas, they don't have I think they do now have a Culver's. But anyways, they don't have a lot of the froyo that we have down here. It's different. So, but they do have a place called Brahms. If you're ever up there, whoo man, it's great. So we hit all of our favorite little places to eat while we were there. But we had a great time. First time all the kids were together in one location. So we took some photos and stuff. But there's not any photos of the wedding online, and that's because at a request of the individuals who were present, it was not filmed or no pictures were taken as a group because there were some, I guess you'd say, some bigwigs that were there, and the guys that were all there from SWAT and from the police department and fire department, they were all in one location. There was like 150 of us, and so Dennis said, we can't let anybody know we're all in one place. And I was like, okay. So I didn't know whether to feel really safe or scared, but anyways, we had a wonderful time, and hopefully he and Angela got off this morning. I hadn't talked to him, but they're headed to Mexico for their honeymoon, so I'm excited. But it was a great time spent with family. We got to spend 4 days in a row with my dad and my stepmom, and we just had a great time. So it's good to visit, but it's good to be home. I did come home with a pair of overalls. So yeah.
There you go.
So I my stepsister, we were in a little. They like to thrift, so we go to the Goodwills and all that with them, and so she came in. She goes, I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but she said, well, I found these, and they were coveralls. They were overalls in my size, and they were brand new, Dickies overalls. So I was pretty excited about that. And so it was the find of the week. But I'll just tell you, they're going to be involved in Fall Festival. So I'm not going to tell you how, because Misty and I already have our project on what we're going to do. But if you're here for the trunk or treat, it'll be a blast. We do have a lot of folks that are sick. I know right now Larry has come out of surgery, Larry Kaysen, and they said successful surgery, everything is good, so just keep praying for him. I think they're going to keep him tonight at least, to keep an eye on him. And then also, I don't see Steve yet. Did she get to come home?
She's
Yeah.
No, I don't know. When Stephen talked to him this morning, they said she's probably going home this afternoon.
Going home this afternoon. Okay. So Terry Lyle, she had her procedure yesterday. So Terry Lyle and Larry Payson.
Where was Larry at?
Thomas. He's at Thomas. And then there was somebody else that's in Thomas, but I can't remember. I got a text message yesterday, and I've looked through my texts and I can't find it. It must have been an instant message. I have so many birthday messages I can't find it. But also, who's having surgery the 24th? Somebody's having surgery the 24th. I have written on my prayer list too.
Daughter's having surgery on the 24th.
That's right. Okay. So we need to remember her. Who else?
Paul was having surgery the 18th.
Barbara. Okay. And who else? Anybody else? Got surgery coming up? All right, what about anybody else sick we need to remember this morning? Any updates on any folks? Have we got an update from Glenda yet on Will? Anybody heard? I don't see her this morning. Her grandson, of course, was diagnosed with cancer, and so they're trying to run through some options. He's going to do some treatments and things, but that's Glenda Jennings. And Will, I can't remember his last name, but my brain's fried this morning.
I think Sunday she said things were looking better. They were more
Good,
optimistic.
okay. A little better. Let's see. And Warner's doing good. Candy's here. Good to have them. Let's see. Joe, you doing good?
Good.
Ruth Ann, where's she at?
She's on the
She's doing good. Where's she? There you are. You doing good?
No, she's not.
No, she's not. She's lying, huh? She's facing some Stones issues. She's got a
No, that's over. That just happens about twice a year.
yeah.
It's my back.
Back now.
Got to
Oh,
have an MRI the 19th.
okay.
Thought it was my hip, but it's my back.
Hmm.
And my knee. I need a knee replacement.
Oh, no.
Everybody else
Hey,
in
you
the
take
church.
my place next
Yeah.
week.
Oh, mercy.
That's right. Barbara has her knee replacement
Yeah.
next week.
Gotta do that.
That's right.
Oh, man.
All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right. Tommy, would you mind leading us in prayer this morning?
Sure. Thank you, Father, for this day, for all the many blessings that you always give us, especially for Jesus, who came and died for us for the remission of our sins. There's a lot of people that are sick here, and really, we would really appreciate your help in getting these people back to their health. Help Ray to have a really good lesson for us. We look forward to him coming back to us, and we know we'll have a good lesson today. Be with everybody that's sick. Forgive us for our many sins. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I want to single them out. We got some visitors here this morning, so good to see y'all here. Now, where are you from?
Winfield,
Winfield.
area.
That's right. Okay. Excellent. Did y'all get a book? You're going to get one. I hid one over here just in case. There you go. Good to have y'all here. Winfield, yeah.
Oh, Winfield.
Winfield. There's at one time I went to school with like 3 guys that all grew up at Winfield. Michael Jackson was there, and I was trying to remember who else grew up there. There was several guys from that area, so pretty cool. And I went to Heritage. All right, so we're on I think it's the 10th lesson in there on African traditional religions. In the past few weeks, we were covering. Actually, we spent I think 3 weeks on Islam, and so we've at this point covered a lot of religions that we're at least somewhat familiar with. The next 2 today with African traditional religions, and next week with Native American religions. I'm going to try to show you a summary of what a lot of the nations within that nation celebrate. There are some common threads. So it's been a while, we slept since then, but way back at the beginning of this series, I mentioned that almost all religions have at least between 7 and 10 of the same components. All of them have prayer, all of them have an age of accountability, all of them have an interest in Creator God, whatever name that they choose to use for that. There are only 3 main monotheistic religions that believe in one God alone, and that, of course, is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But a lot of the ones we'll cover today and next week have a feeling, and it's taught from early on, it comes from the garden, that not only is there a creator God, but there may be other gods involved in creation. And some of that is taught not long after the flood, where the sons of Noah go out and across the earth after the Tower of Babel. And as they do that, they teach a creation event. Every religion has a creation event. They teach about the ark, which is really interesting. They all have some kind of a flood story. And so there are some common threads that go all the way back to the garden and to the ark. But after that, the commonality ends, especially with the 2 we're going to talk about the next 2 weeks. African traditional religions have a whole host of different themes and gods, and we'll get to those. Next week, when we get to Native American religions, there are actually religions based on some of those things. Like, for instance, There's an entire religious population within Native Americans, or as they say now today, indigenous people, that are all based on drums, which is interesting. So they may take like one aspect of worship, whether it be dancing. Talk about, you ever heard somebody, I guess just the way where I was raised up and living near reservations, but people say, well, maybe you should, do the rain dance. You ever heard about dancing for rain? Okay, so, and there are certain things that they represent, their God will help them. So whether it's a crop, the corn god, which we think is, most of us, if we were raised monotheistic, which I'm assuming all of us were, to have a god of corn is, a cotton god. But if you really think about it, it's not too much of a stretch to see how we've created gods, lowercase g, with certain images. And so when we get to African traditional religions and Native American religions, just pause for a second and realize that though it may seem strange, they don't see any difference between us and them. Let's define a place of worship, okay? If you're a religious group and you have a place of worship, where would you usually meet? In a building, okay? You would meet somewhere where there was plenty of seating, right? Okay, so a place where there's a lot of seating. What else would we need if we needed a place to meet?
Air conditioner.
What's that? Air conditioner. That sure would be nice. A lot of these won't, but that sure would be nice. But you have to have seats. If you're going to talk to 10,000 people, what do you need? Microphone, a PA system. You probably need to have various parts of the service covered, which includes getting people in the right seats, setting in the right areas. You're going to have food to feed them, which communion they would look at as our food, even though it's so small. It's like a little chiclet and a little sip of juice. But when you look at all of these religious groups and what they do, if I were to take an African traditional person raised in a certain religious group, and I took them to Bryant-Denny Stadium, and I showed them the images out in front with the dates, there are 3 men there, and I walked them up to the facility and showed them the PA system and the screen and the seating, and then I have the stage, which is down in the center. What's different? Well, what would you expect of a religious group? Well, there's a day of worship, right? Can we know what day they'll be assembled in that theater, in that place of worship? Of course, on Saturday. Now you're saying, Ray, that is not true. You can't say those things. That's not what. I could take you to other places where images have been created. I could take you to Enterprise, and we could talk about what happened back in the early 1900s when the crops were attacked. The cotton crops were attacked by the boll weevil. And they then decided to plant peanuts, found out that the climate was rich for peanuts. They not only created a giant image to put in the center of town, but in past years, they've had competitions between local businesses to create the same image using that image of the boll weevil. Like for instance, if you go to Enterprise, go to McDonald's. Ronald McDonald is sitting outside in front. I don't have a picture of it, but I promise you it's there. And he's holding a Coke in one hand, and a fry in one hand, and a burger in one hand, and a Happy Meal in the other hand, and the other 2 hands don't have anything. That's the boll weevil. So Ronald McDonald is not the clown. If you think the clown's ugly, wait till you see that thing. But if I take you to certain cities, and you're from a traditional religion, and you see images, and you see people bowing down to it, or you hear of, you can't, if you are a part of this religion, you have to wear a certain religious garment, a certain color, it's not that far of a stretch. Now, we don't, that is major stepping on our toes, thinking about sports as a religion, but they would see that they're no different than us. And it goes beyond that. It also goes to nationalism. So like we're very proud of our country, we're proud of our flag, we're proud of our military, and we display images of our forefathers. Well, they do the same. Native American religions, they put them on totem poles. By the way, have you ever heard the term low man on the totem pole? That doesn't mean that they are the least. It's not like they went down here at the last one, and then they kind of drew this one down on the ground. No, a totem pole was meant to represent the growing community and the leaders from bottom to top. So actually, the lower man on the totem pole was the first one carved. Then they went higher up on the pole. So that just maybe helped you a little bit. So little man on totem pole doesn't mean that he was the very least and barely made it on the tree, stump, but instead it means that's where they started, and then they moved up the chain. So kind of take a different look at it. But when you see their carved images and you see their worship of certain, whether it be rain or whether it be crops, it's not that much of a stretch for us to see how we could be perceived as being idol worshipers. We do the same thing with music and our entertainment. We will build huge monuments to certain singers and songwriters and actors. If you've ever gone to LA or Hollywood, you can see a walk of fame. You can see handprints of certain people. So if you're from this part of the world, they're going to say, it looks like y'all are just like us. You have different objects of religion. It's not like every culture has a giant image of Jesus. If you Eureka Springs, you go through, you go to Africa, you can find in South America large images of Jesus. But these images that they have are completely foreign to anything we've seen. Unless you've studied this, some of them will probably be pretty new to you. But right now, if you were to do a search, and in your books I put 550 million people that live in Africa, and that has changed. That was the book that I originally designed was in 2010, but as of this week, in Africa, there are 1.54 billion people. There's 7 billion people on the planet. So you can do the math. About 1/7, almost 1/6 of the population is African. Now, does anybody know this is not the most populated continent? What's the most populated continent? Asia, which has nearly 3 billion people. So we feel like we're pretty solid here in America, right? We're a strong nation. We're strong people. We're very nationality oriented, but we are a small drop in a big ocean. In fact, there are more. If you just to take America and you take the country, just the lower 48, you could put it inside of Africa and Asia many times over. So we are very small. That's why we have to, carry a big stick sometimes when it comes to military, because we are the little guy in the pool. We don't think of that because we've been so successful so many times past in wars, but yeah, we are a small, very small people. So when you look at Russia, how can they continue to bombard Ukraine? They're losing a lot of battles, but why are they sacrificing hundreds of thousands of soldiers? Because they have them. I mean, Russia has the people. There's no reason why they won't line up and do it. The same thing when it comes to China. In Asian parts of the world, they have so many people that their military dwarfs. Ours is just like tiny compared to theirs. And so think about that, 1.54 billion people. They assume that by the time of 2070 that they will have over 3 billion people, but Asia will have still very many more. The other thing too about this is the median age of Africans is 19. When you go over and you do research, you'll find a lot of villages where there are kids raising kids because their parents have died of AIDS. And so you'll have a 7-year-old raising a 4-year-old. And so the life expectancy is only 36. The average age of Africans is 19. And I think that the average age of Asians is like 32 years old. So very strange how, and the literacy rate, 16 to 18%, is because of Christianity. Christians have gone over there and planted schools. The majority of schools in Africa, the vast majority of schools in Africa have Christian influence, whether it was founded or it's run now by Christians. So had it not been for Christianity, Africa would still be, this poverty line is low, but it would be even worse if Christians didn't go in and do mission work and plant schools and such. Africa, really, we look at it now as this great nation, but it's not always been like this. In fact, if you go back and you do a little research, prior to 1951, there were basically 7 major countries that ran Africa. The only one that can be pulled off here alone would be Ethiopia and Egypt. Okay, so Egypt has always been, you go to Exodus chapter 2, and you'll see how Egypt had formed. They had a king. We call him a pharaoh, but he was the king of Egypt. Sometimes the scriptures will call him the king of Egypt. So Africa was well formed. At least some of these outlying countries were very well formed close to the Middle East at the time of Christ, and long before even the time of Christ. Moses comes, some 2,000 years or around about before Jesus. And Ethiopia was a very thriving, strong country. When you go back and you look at all the dates as to when some of these new nations were formed, Ethiopia does not have a date. In fact, if you go to Acts chapter 8, there's an Ethiopian eunuch. We don't know a lot about him other than he's the secretary for Candace, the treasurer. And so he works for the Ethiopian government. And he's got his chariot and he's riding through the desert and he gets stopped. Philip, of course, runs to him, teaches him the gospel, baptizes him in a little oasis there in the middle of the desert. And he goes on his way rejoicing. But it shows us that at the time of Christ, this is centuries and centuries before a lot of the national governments we see today were ever formed. Ethiopia has always stood. But going back to the seven nations, this is in order of the size of their influence. It's on here. I didn't know if you could read that part. But so the British colonies controlled a lot of Africa. Why do we need to know that, Ray? Why do we need to know all this? Because if you understand that British colonies controlled a lot of Africa, the nation of the United Kingdom is highly Christian, at least at the times that these nations were formed. So when they come in and they form a government, or they bring in a governor to run the country, they would have brought with them Christian influence, specifically the Church of England, the Anglican Church. Now we look at the Episcopal Church. So these nations, South Africa, Nigeria, part of Egypt, Kenya, Sudan, Uganda, British Somaliland, which is now Somalia, British East Africa, and now Tanzania were all British colonies. Underneath them, the next largest nation with colonies and territories would have been the French, which would have included Niger, Guinea is in here, Ivory Coast. I had a missionary friend, a professor in school that went to Ivory Coast every year to do mission work. So that part of the world, French dominated. Portuguese had some places within Africa. The Spanish, Belgian, Italian, and then German colonies. Most of these have disbanded and they founded new nations based on whether it's language or territory. Some of them are based on where the outlying rivers are, like the Congo River or the Nile River. A lot of those cities, those countries will kind of grow around those major landmarks. Out here in the Sahara Desert, there's not a lot of people. The population that is out there has to have food and water brought in. And this has always puzzled me. I don't know why, but it's always puzzled me that we do a lot of work in this part of the world. Churches of Christ and other religious groups will say do a lot of work in this part of the world. And I guess part of my mindset is if this is nothing but desert, right? There's no water, there's no food, not very many critters, right, out there to shoot or to hunt. If there's no water, there's no fish, all right? Well, what are you going to eat? What are you going to drink?
Nothing.
Right, nothing. So, why do people still live there? That's their home. That's the only place they can say belongs to them. And that's why they stay, and that's why they die so young. It's because they refuse to give up their land. Now, from our Western mindset, American mindset is, I drove through a lot of towns on the way up to Missouri and drove through a lot of towns on the way home. And some of them are completely abandoned. I mean, there's literally cities you'll drive through and the majority of the buildings and the factories are completely empty. A factory will empty and the whole city will just empty. I mean, we'll build a building, we'll pay, we won't, but the local community, wherever it is, will build a facility or build a stadium, for instance, and pay $2 million for it, and then in 10 years they'll blow it up and do it again. Because we don't build the buildings to last. We don't expect the structure to stand. We don't expect the team to stay, really. So in these cities, if we build a factory on, let's say we're building light bulbs, and they come in and they pull out and they go to Mexico, those jobs leave. Well, either the people go with the job or they go to another city. You can't stay in this town that is literally dying. And so it's not the same with their mindset. We, even though we won't like it, we will move. You're right. We'll go to a different city. So how many of you were actually born in Baldwin County? Okay, 3, right? That's it. We've all been from somewhere else. We were transplanted. I call myself an Alabamian. I believe I've been in Alabama way more in my life than any other state I've ever lived in. But as Lonnie Jones says, I don't know why, but he says if a cat gives birth to kittens in the oven, it doesn't make them biscuits. Is that right? So Lonnie says unless you were born and raised in Alabama, you can't claim to be Alabamian. But we will move. I've moved a lot in my life. My dad moved a lot in my life. But for whatever reason, these people are so convinced that this land is their land that they will stay on it even though there's nothing to eat and nothing to drink. Now, if we were smart and they were smart, we'd say the best thing we could send them is a U-Haul. You know, don't send them Culligan Man, send them a U-Haul, and move them to the coast where they can fish and hunt. And that's, to us, we're going, that's common sense. I mean, even when the colonies were formed in America, they didn't enter into the country for many years. The spread across the West took a long time, even after Louisiana Purchase. So why did the colonies stay on the East Coast? Because they could fish and they could hunt. And as they got deeper into territory, there were hostiles. And again, think about this part of the world. These people, first of all, who's going to come out there with spears and guns and take over this desert? Nobody. Nobody. We're not going to do that. Well, unless we find out there's oil and then we're all over it. But this part of the world, why would you stay? Why would you stay? Because this is their home.
That's one of the comedians always had his act based around that.
Sam Kinison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Sam.
Yeah, he goes, move! Yeah.
70 years from now, it's
Yeah.
gonna be Sam.
It's gonna be saying, that's right. We would think he would move, but this is their home. They're not gonna leave. They're gonna stay. If they're that strict on their thinking when it comes to property, imagine how their feelings are when it comes to religion. So they are so entrenched in their gods, in their teachings, their religion, that it's very hard when we go there to convince them otherwise. Not the only, but one of the main things that we do when we go to this part of the world is we provide for their needs. We go ahead and go, you're sitting on a bunch of sand and dirt, but you like it, we're going to bring you water. We're not going to talk bad about it. We will talk about the rich history of this part of the world. But we will bring in water, we will bring in food. And when you do that, you feed them. And I'm going to show you a picture here towards the end of a kid walking. I'm only going to show you his legs. I don't have to show you from the top up. How thin they are. Some will have distended stomachs because of malnutrition and because of not having enough to eat and drink. But again, we have to be lovingly understanding that these people are in this part of the world because this is the only place they want to be. When you've got the work, they do a lot of farming. There are a lot of crops. Believe it or not, in that part of the world, certain things that can grow a little better in a desert climate. Then you've got hunting. There are animals out there. I mean, when you go to a zoo, you want to see an African lion, right? You want to see some of the critters that are from this part of the world. And so they have a lot of that. And because of that, we don't see this a lot on the news, but they will have lions or tigers, not bears, but they will go into these villages and they'll slaughter hundreds of people. There are crocodiles that patrol the Nile that will kill villages full of people. They'll have kids just come up missing, and they know that the crocodiles I'm not joking, they are as long as this room. They're huge. I mean, they're dinosaur-like in their size, and so they don't catch them. They can't catch them. They can try to kill them, but so again, you've got piranhas in the water. You've got all these things that we would say, I don't want to hunt or fish or any of that because there's too many dangers, but they take pride in killing giant critters. In fact, they will, if they kill an African elephant, what do? They cut the tusks off. The ivory of the tusk is worth far more. In fact, now there is a movement that you can actually go on your phone and send money to this group of people. But there are men who were, familiar with poaching that knew where to go, and now they're actually cutting the tusks off the elephants ahead of time so that the elephants are not killed. So they're going out, trapping them, cutting the tusks off, because otherwise people will go out and poach them. They'll kill them and then take the tusks. So all those things, there are so many things there that you can hunt. They do have a lot of beautiful creatures. Some of their customs, their living conditions are very different from ours. If you go into an African village, they're made with straw, they're made with mud, they're made with sticks, they're made with cardboard, whatever can be found. I've known men who've gone over there and done mission work and come back and cried like babies because they just said, you just don't understand the poverty conditions. Drinking water out of a puddle and such, and just almost disgustingly horrific conditions. But they're very strong when it comes to family tradition, and they will stay very religious throughout their life. They will hold very strongly to some of these gods that we're going to see here in just a minute. And again, I put African traditional religions as a kind of as a framework for all of them, but there are really dozens of different groups. So let's think about some of these religions that are in this part of the world, localized and how they've mixed. On the right side of the screen here, I don't know if you can read this, it's just a list of a handful of the gods that they worship in this part of the world. A lot of it is by oral tradition. They don't have a Bible like we do, a book. They are fascinated with a Bible if you give it to them. They've never seen anything like it. So, but they have different gods. One is Allah, which I think that's interesting, that their Allah is female. Don't tell our Muslim friends. They see mother goddess, ruler of the underworld, goddess of fertility. That's in Igbo and in Nigeria. Another one of their gods that's common in Africa is Dagon, which sounds a lot like Dagon from the Bible. And Mali, who is the supreme god, the head god, the god of all gods. It's not, to me, when you hear Allah, you hear Dagon, you hear some of these other names, they sound very familiar to gods of the Old Testament. Then you've got, this is, I think it's Cagin, how you say it? It's C-A-G-N. See if I have the pronunciation. Yeah, Cagin is how you say it. Southwestern Africa, again, a creator god. So every religion within Africa believes that we were created by some being. The best way really to get into these cultures is to use their terminology. And so you talk about who is your supreme God, and you talk, well, but you know there is only one supreme God, and He gave us, created the world, and you go through the story of the Bible, you can use that. Eshu from Nigeria, that is the trickster. They believe in, some of this comes from Spanish culture. Remember, some of the colonies were Spanish colonies. If you've ever gone to Costa Rica, if you've ever gone to Cuba, if you've ever gone to Dominican Republic, anything down to the southern part of California, the Caribbean islands, they practice a religion called Santeria. Have you ever heard of Santeria? So the women will dress in complete white outfits. If you ever go to these countries, you'll see them out in the street corners. They are priestesses, I guess you could call them, of the religion. They intentionally use their bodies, if you will, to bring people into their religion. But they wear certain garments, they wear certain beads and things like that. They have voodoo that they will use, and so you go into these little shops and you buy these little critters looking things with straw on it, and you don't know that it's, a voodoo doll. And they're going out in the street trying to get you to buy their jewelry. Well, that's like rosary to a Catholic. So they're selling their religious items to benefit their religious group. And so sometimes when you do that, I have to keep that in mind. When we went to Cuba several times, is those people that are selling stuff in their shops, I don't know where that money's going. Some of it's going to the government, some of it's going to a religious group. So you just kind of have to be careful. But another one is Kadanda, which is in East Africa, another creator god name. Kabuka, that's in East Africa, a war god. This is Vishnu of the Hindu religion. Then you have Liza, which is Central and South Africa, again, a creator god or the god of the sky, and so forth. But anyways, there's more on here, all from South Africa, West Africa, East Africa, but they have similar gods, they just have different names for them. And so when you get over there and you start talking to them, we don't have all of that. We have one God who does all things. But when you've been taught that your whole life, and we can go over there and do archaeological digs, we can find out that for 3,000 years they have continued to worship these gods in that culture. Not a lot has changed. And the same thing will be true when we get to Native American religion next week. The artistic work, I mean, you've seen probably some of the images that they will produce. This is an African image, but if I didn't tell you that, you would probably think that's an Asian image. Doesn't that look a lot like a Buddha or an image that would be in a pagoda somewhere, Japan, China? India, yeah, absolutely. You'd think Indian, Hindu religion, but that's not. This is actually from Africa. So when we do archaeological digs, we see all of them have similar images. But how did that happen? How can we go to, I know I've said this before in here, how can we go to Mexico and see Incan and Mayan temples that are in the form of like this, right? Which is a pyramid. And we go to Africa and we see the pyramids of Giza, and we can come over here in Native American religions, and they didn't make their pyramids out of stone, they made them out of round earth. So they're called Indian burial mounds. So every culture that practices some kind of religion has some similar characteristics. And for whatever reason, in Africa, when they made these little images, they would sell some of these images. They would keep them in their homes. They put them up on shelves. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, a friend of mine, a professor in school, went to Ivory Coast. He's the one who was in the house, and he asked the guy, he said, what are all these gods for? They had mantle that had little candles for each of them. And he said, well, that's I think it was the wheat god or something. And said, well, what does he do? Well, he's the guy. I asked him to bring wheat. And I said, well, how was the wheat crop? And the guy's like, oh, it was terrible last year. He's like, well, then what do you do? And he said, well, I do this. And he takes the god off the shelf, and he takes a stick, and he spanks the god. And he takes the god and puts it back on the shelf. And Jerry Davidson, not the one that lived here, it's my professor, Jerry Davidson from North Alabama, he said, it was all we could do, but just laugh. This guy's just whipping this little piece of stone with a stick, and somehow that's going to persuade this god to bring water on the wheat crop. But again, that's what these images are for. You put them up in your house, put them on display, you would worship them. African traditional religions also in the early, not so much today, but in other centuries, they, again, looking at Dagon and Molech, where they had outstretched arms on their gods, they would put children in the arms of the god and burn them alive. And so some of that has been discovered in Africa. So similar to Middle Eastern religions, they do some of the same things. But every one of them has a concept of creation. Every one of these that you could look at from all these different colonies and territories have an image that God created the heavens and the earth, all the cosmos. They all have a concept of a divine being. We would argue with them probably about whether or not there is one God or multiple, but they do see a creator God. I don't know why their creator God can't be the God, but they still think that there is a creator. They have concept of lesser gods or spirits, and I did put a capital G on there, should have been a lowercase g, but little gods. They also they believe in demonology. They believe in spirits. So if you, and in fact, you can go into stores today. I don't know of any that's in Foley. I'm trying to remember. I bet I can find some though, where you can go in and you can buy incense, or you can buy like sage or certain things that you can burn, and you can burn them in your house. You say, well, this is for good luck, or this is beyond essential oils. This is actually taking and bundling sticks and burning them. And what they would do is they would do that in a way to appease the god. And so if you want to, like for instance, you have a wheat god in your house, you wouldn't, but you have a god of wheat and you had a bad crop, well, you spank him, you put him back on the shelf, and then you start burning whatever his favorite incense is. So if the wheat god, I don't think it would be wheat related, that would be something like, cannibalism, but whatever he wants, you would burn that element to them. And just like in Hindu religion, they would put blood on their doorsteps to, just like, again, sounds a lot like the Passover, yeah?
If there's a tomato god, get me one because we need
Yeah. His name is Bob the tomato. So, but it is funny, but it is strange how and with the spirits, they are very, I guess as Paul would put it, they were superstitious. So for a lot of African people, they won't eat certain foods because they assume that it's associated with a certain god. I'll tell you something else if you ever go to Africa. Some of their cheese is made with blood. And so when they take milk and blood and they create cheese to eat. So they will, whether you know it or not, you may actually be eating something that is intended to be offered to an idol or is intended to persuade you, if you will, to become a follower of their religion. So it's almost like they see it as a way, instead of doing indoctrination, they just bring you into their culture and feed you their food and hand you their gods and assume that you'll be convinced that their way is the only way. But they do have
all the aids that they have over there.
Yes, absolutely. And see, again, in Africa, polygamy is absolutely, in most traditional religions, is fine. In fact, there are a few that believe that women can marry as many husbands as they want. So just like men have that privilege in a lot of those countries, I guess I'm just saying privilege loosely, but the other term, the others with the women having multiple men, it was to have multiple incomes. So she could actually take money from multiple men in the village. But they practice a lot of the prostitution and things like that. And because of that, the AIDS, HIV crisis came from Africa, just like Corona came from China.
They're witch doctors or they're priests.
That's right, they're witch doctors or priests. And if you want to find something, or if you want to be healed of something, you have to go to the witch doctor. Again, sounds very similar to what we see next week with Native American religions with magic men. But they would come, they do their dance, they do their song, they wear makeup on their face, just like Native American religions. And in that, they would ask the shaman to perform a ceremony to give them what they want. And so if you were sick, in fact, people today, I'll tell you, I'm not saying that I would do this, but there are some certain things you can eat, and there are certain things that you can drink that you can't get in a store. But these people that are these shamans and witch doctors, they have that. In fact, I'll give you an example of something that from a kid, again, being raised around a lot of Native American culture, you know how we dug a well? You know where we found the water? You know how we found the water in our yard? What? Witch it. What? You take a stick. It's got to be a certain kind of stick. My dad would probably be upset. I don't remember what the stick was.
Willow.
What is it?
Willow.
Willow tree. Okay. So you take that and you do it. It's got a fork on it. You hold it, and as you get closer to the water, it'll turn down. I've seen it happen. I promise you, I've seen it happen. But these are tricks of the trade that were taught to these cultures that's lost today. People wouldn't know how to do that unless you had somebody teach you how to do it.
And they still do it in Tennessee. I watched a guy do it one time, and
Yeah.
I said, man, that's as fake as anything else. He said, you stand behind me and hold this stick,
Yeah.
and just walk along behind me, and all of a sudden that stick had twisted my head. He wasn't doing a thing.
Yeah.
That stick twisted down. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. How did you do that?
Right. It's magic, right? No, it's nature. And a lot of the times there's movies that have been made. I have not seen the whole movie. I've just seen parts of the movie Apocalypto that Mel Gibson did. It's about I think it's about Mayan religion. But what they did was the shaman or the priest knew when the cycle of the sun and the eclipse was going to happen, and he brings them out to worship their god and say, we're going to keep killing children until the god is appeased. And finally the eclipse, everything turns black, the sun begins to come back out, and then they're like, okay, well, we'll stop the killing. And you say, well, where does that come from? Well, these priests were smart enough. They knew astrology. They knew certain cycles and seasons. They knew how to tell if a storm was coming in. And so they were able to not predict, but just simply by the signs that were around them, tell a group of people that were very naive, I know what's going on. In fact, they will take wraps. You can use leaves. If you ever have a cut on your leg, there are certain leaves you can use that will have healing properties. We just, we go to Walgreens or we go to a doctor and ask for a prescription. But in those days, and so yes, it looks crazy, but many of the things they did actually worked. And it was because it was passed down to them. But the priests and the shamans would take advantage of it to control the population. And say, if you don't do this, this will happen. Another thing in Africa, if you have twins, both are to be killed immediately. Because one of them is a demon, and you don't know which one is, so you have to kill both the babies. There is a book written by a missionary, and I can't remember what her name was, but she went there to do mission work, and she would go out. Sometimes the father or the village chief would be so worried about his conscience killing a child, instead of killing the baby or the babies, he would take them out into the wilderness, way out in the jungle, and drop them and let them be eaten by whatever creature. So this missionary lady, she would wait and see whenever they would do that, take them out, and then she would hide, and when they left, she would go retrieve the babies and then raise them. But if the family found out, they were extremely angry with the woman, because that is you don't know if it's the demon child. You can't just go and pluck up these demon children. So again, strange beliefs, but still to this day, some of these cultures, they don't have televisions in this part of the world. Some don't have any internet. We sent a box of computers once. This Gulf Shores probably 15 years ago, and boxes were these that you wind up, and so you would wind it. There's no battery, and there's nothing to plug in. So you would flip it open, and they were hard plastic, and you would spin this thing as long as you could, and the screen would slowly come up, and it went off of a satellite. So they were able to have internet on these little devices. So we give them access to things like Google and stuff. Now, I don't know why we can't get things like that. we have to pay for the internet, but nevertheless, that's something that they can do. So you can have access if you have people that know how to get it there. But we will go over there a lot of times, and we'll build wells. Another thing too about building a well in a community, that changes the whole community. If you can build a well in a city, because they then have the water. The problem we have is we will leave with smiles on our faces and all that money invested, and the tribal chief may take control of that well and say the only way you can have access is through me. So you have to really have a lot of groundwork done. You have to do your due diligence to make sure that the community where you're planting that well will be used for good and not for evil. Any thoughts on those? Yeah.
They talk about all the time about in some of these war-torn areas where they're sending in shiploads of food.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once that food gets on land, then the warlords and those people take it over. That's why the people are starving. It's not because there's not food there.
Yeah.
It's because it's taken over by people that want something out of it.
I'll tell you, I guess I could say this. I know it's on the internet. I think it's on, yes. When I flew into Cuba the first time, we flew over Havana, but we flew into Santa Clara, and Santa Clara is the major city of that particular province. And so when we're coming over the ocean and coming up onto the land, the most beautiful trees you have ever seen. I'm not talking about just palm trees. I'm talking about banana trees and mango trees and pineapple, and you're flying in over acres and acres and acres of all this stuff, and you're just like, man, this is amazing. And so we land, and about, a minute or 30 seconds before we see the landing strip, we see these giant mounds, and inside those mounds were just holes, and that's where military would hide their vehicles as you flew in. And so we land the plane, and as we get out, we're so excited to see all this stuff that we just drove through. I'm gonna pick me a plantain right off the tree, right? Well, we got out of the airport, and it was absolute poverty. I mean, we got a mile from the airport, and there's no electricity. And so you're like, what in the world? So I asked one of the locals, I said, can we go see that ranch or whatever it is? And they said, no, that's Castro's land. And so he took the money and invested it. So that's how you can go to a state dinner, a diplomatic dinner in some of those countries, and sit down and have all this food piled up. Is they have it. They just don't give it to everybody else. And they control the population. In Cuba, for instance, what they do is they come in when they have kindergartners, preschoolers, they'll set them in a room, and they'll say, pray to God for bread. Pray to God for bread. And the kids will pray to God for bread. They'll come in, no bread. God must not be listening to your prayers. Now pray to Castro for bread. And this is when Castro was in power. And so they prayed to Castro, and they would open up all the doors and all the windows and just bring in all this bread, because bread's free in Cuba. You can go get your daily rations of bread. Yeah.
What they need to learn, you have to whip them.
Huh? How to whoop them? Yeah. They far outnumber them, that's for sure. But you're not allowed to have any weapon of any kind. If they catch you with, the only thing you're allowed to have is a machete if you're doing farm work and stuff. But it's just a different world. We don't realize how vastly different we are from the rest of the world. We're kind of living in a bubble. And this is the fear that I always have, is that we don't teach about other nations and history and religion of other countries, so that when you go over there, you have this culture shock. You're just like, how come they do this? They don't even speak to me in English. Yeah, because they don't have to speak any of it.
Yeah, our son went to Jamaica, and he said the side that the people lives on was, like you said, poverty, but you go where all those resorts are, said it's totally different. And he said there's so much drugs and stuff.
That's
on
right.
Their side, you know, that they live on.
That's right. Yeah, they don't tell you that when they at daylight, at dark, if you're a citizen of that country, you have to leave the resort town. They have when you drive into Havana, as an example, there are every county you go through, not just every city, but I'm talking about every county. There's large outposts. You have to present your passport, tell them where you're going, what you're doing, and then if you're coming back that way, they mark down what time you estimate you'll be back, so that if you're not, they'll go after you. And when you go to Havana, you have to present your driver's license or whatever paperwork. So any Cubans we had with us, they had to be back across that line before the sun went down. Kind of like when you were a kid riding your bike, mom says as soon as the street light's on, they have to be back. If not, they're arrested, they're prosecuted. So you see all these people that are working out there and doing tables and all that stuff. If they're locals, they're not allowed to stay in the resort town overnight. So they get to see all of us coming in on our big giant ships and lays on our neck and buying so much fruit we can't get. We're out blowing money on souvenirs, and as soon as it gets dark, they have to leave the city because they're not allowed to stay in town. You cannot rent a hotel room. You cannot rent a facility. You cannot rent a house as a local person unless you go through certain hoops to do it. So you can't live there. The homelessness we have here in Foley and Mobile and Pensacola, the poverty there is tremendous, but they're not allowed to be in the city. If anybody's homeless, they're not allowed to be in the city, and so they have to have paperwork that says they can come in, and they have to come in quickly. But that's right. Jamaica, a lot of these places, it's just poverty out in the part where the tourists aren't. And so all we see, if you go to these countries and you see, like in Cuba, you see all the cars. You say, oh, look at all these beautiful 50s cars. That's because at one time we were going over there taking these vehicles, but those people don't own those vehicles. Those are taxis. Those taxis are owned by the government. So it's not like some guy goes, you know what, I'm going to invest all my retirement in this 1956 Chevy, or something. That's not the way it is at all. They don't own those cars. So there's a lot of control. And so we as tourists will go into a country and we'll just enjoy being there and buying up stuff. And we don't really look deeper at the real people who need help. So just something to consider. Yeah, Jay. Uh-huh.
I did find out they do come, they work for us, and they do things, and we tip them, and we think, this is gonna help them out. I know a few places where I, give them $20 or $10, which is almost $500 for them.
Right.
But every one of them, when I end up talking to them, they don't even get 10% of their tips. They have to pay all that just to get there to work. So when you're getting them $2, they might be lucky if they get $1 by the time they get home. Just to pay, just to work.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they keep them in poverty.
Yeah.
So, we try to do all this work and we send them stuff. They're getting hardly any of it.
And their prisons are full of people that are not like, some are druggies and murderers, but they're very rare. Most of the people that are in jails in some of these countries are people who have disobeyed the custom or have stolen. That's a big crime, especially in these countries that have so little food, is if you go work at a nice restaurant during the day, then you try to take a loaf of bread home to your folks, they'll put you in jail for a few years for stealing a loaf of bread. So it's really fear that keeps them in line, which religion plays a part of that, yeah.
It's like when I went to China, it's kind of a culture shock because their hiring practices, their labor and everything else is completely different. I had to audit some plants that FedEx had there. And I would go in and all of the manufacturing equipment and such as that was what we would consider antique. And what we do in this country when we want to manufacture something faster, well, we build a different machine and what have you. Well, over there, they just hire more people.
Right.
And they'll hire people way up in the northern part of China to work in the southern areas where it's more industrialized, and they hire them to work 6 days a week and live there. They feed them 2 meals a day,
Right.
and they work them 12 hours a day. And on Chinese New Year, everybody goes home. The factories are empty. And if they were treated well where they worked, they may come back, but otherwise they go back to their homes in the northern part of China where they help out with the farm and such as that. And they work so hard.
Yeah.
I granted here, you know, you're always talking to the people you work with and all
Right.
that kind of, not over there. When they ring that bell to go to work, it is silent except the noise the machines make.
Yeah.
And it's really, really different, and it takes you back.
I can't remember the name of the movie. It seems like it may have been Kevin Costner. Was it McFarland, the one that were the track stars, and they have all the Hispanic kids that they have to go get out of the fields to come run for the track team. So just to kind of show you from Spanish culture, they are taught a work ethic from as soon as they can hold a shovel. And it's one of the reasons why we have so many people coming in from especially Spanish cultures and from the Central America. They'll come into our country and they will stack 10 families in one house. I've been in Albertville. We had families that they had 3 families living in the same house, but they all came in shifts. They slept in the same beds, everything, same shower, everything, but they did it on shifts. So these people come in, they'll pack cars full and vans full, and how come at the border we're finding people holding on to the axle of a car, or hanging on to or being placed, making a dummy gas tank and sliding 2 men in that hole? Why are they doing that? Oh, they're all drug addicts, and some maybe coming in and smuggling people. We're seeing that in California right now. But some are just simply trying. They would rather die in that environment or blow their entire life savings to get a coyote to get them across the border than to live another minute in their culture. And so it's very different from African religions. They'll stay no matter what. But these Spanish folks will come. They will come as quickly as they can, and then they will save the money. And if you ever want to really appreciate Hispanic culture, go to a Western Union or a post office and see them shipping packages and sending money. They'll get a paycheck for $1,000 and send $999 of it back to their family so that they can get the money to then get them here. So setting aside all the illegality of that, which is a big deal, mostly it's just trying to get a better life and get out of their country. But folks here will not do that. They will stay no matter what. Yeah, James?
So in Africa, how receptive are they to the word?
It depends on which
How
area.
dangerous is it to do?
Right. The cultures that are more Western oriented, so places like Ivory Coast, places like South Africa, Tanzania, these places have been colonized by British folks, English folks. So the language is there, and as soon as the language is there, so is the King James Bible. So on those cultures that have more of a Western influence, it's easier. But it's very hard in some of these nations to go in and do mission work. They will kill you. There are certain indigenous islands around Africa that it is against the law, prohibited by international law, to disturb those people. You cannot go up and take pictures. If you watch on the internet, there's YouTube channels that are dedicated to this, to people who've decided they're going to infiltrate. There's one kid. He's a college kid. He's like, I'm going to teach him the gospel, and I'm going to take my Bible. They killed him and they ate him. Okay? And then there's another guy that just recently, he went and he goes out there, and he got away, but one of the guys on the other boat that was with him had a spear through the leg. They were trying to kill him. So and some of them, they'll come in, and in fact, if you go and you read when they're trying to convert people in Australia, some of the Aborigine nations, in the outlying parts, people would go in and they just befriend them and love on them and put stuff on them, and then they'd kill them in their sleep because they didn't want those Westerners there, or those people that were more English. So it's very hard to just go in. There's another movie, I think it's South America, it's not African. It's got Robert De Niro, The Mission. Wasn't Robert De Niro in that, The Mission?
Yeah.
Was that movie? So anyways, he and another guy, they're trying to get into the country to teach them Christianity. And it just shows the perils that you have to go through to get their appreciation. They climb a waterfall to try to get into the good graces of the people. But that's kind of all that in a nutshell. Any other thoughts or questions about African traditional religions? It's hard to do it in 50 minutes, but...
They had a pretty good movie called The Mosquito Coast, where they were trying... They showed several different religions that had gone in, and Catholicism and, what was the other one? I can't think of the other two religious bodies that had tried to get established. And the only one that was still there was the Catholics, but they had allowed all of the local culture to invade the religious practices. So
Right.
they followed more of the cultural things than they did the Catholic religion.
Right. They'll bring in certain aspects of their
Yeah.
local customs. Yeah.
The Mormons did a lot of that.
Who did that?
The Mormons did a lot.
Yes,
of
they
that.
do. Yes, especially in the
All of them
West.
have disappeared too.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's a couple of shows on Netflix I cannot recommend to you unless you have a device that filters out bad stuff. There's a really good one they just came out with a few months ago that it shows you Brigham Young, how he became the first governor of Utah. And I mean, we're talking about Custer's Last Stand. That was a reverse order where the Native Americans were successful. But if you'll go and look at what happened in the western part of the world, specifically coming in Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, the Mormons, which we'll get to in 2 weeks, killed hundreds of thousands of natives. They would bring them in, and they would make them slaves, and they would kill them by the thousands, take away their property.
Not just natives, they would wipe out wagon trains.
That's
They
right.
had they had what they called regulators.
Regulators, that's right.
And the Mormon church had their own armies.
There's a whole show, a Netflix show on the Donner Party, and if you're familiar with that, they a lot of them would capture certain wagon trains, and they would eat them because they were so hungry. So it just, again, all this stuff that happens, oh, that would never happen here. It happened in this country too, some years past. And next week we'll talk about how each of the Native American religions have some similar characteristics, but I'll go through and show some of that. I have a pot in my office. I may bring it in here and let you look at it. It's a Navajo pot, but my mother was raised on Navajo, partly on a reservation, and so she spoke fluent Navajo. So my grandpa. It's really cool to learn. You don't realize when you're growing up how many things you're learning. Just like some of you, if you were Alabama or Auburn fan, you probably learned stats as a kid because your dad listened to the radio and watched television. Well, as growing up in a culture where certain terms and phrases were used, I didn't realize that I was getting that information. So, but it's really neat to look back on some of the things we were taught. Yeah, Jay.
I just wanted to say, I've heard this before, a long time ago, but I heard it from the other side.
Right.
When they were talking about Christianity.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that popped up is when you said lesser gods.
Yeah.
They think Christianity has lesser gods too.
Right.
You have the Virgin Mary. You have St. Peter. You
Right.
have
All
these
humans.
other ones. So they're thinking, we're all the same. It's just we just got this copy, you got that copy.
Yep.
So when you're thinking of lesser gods, their lesser gods for us is Virgin Mary.
Yep.
Is the number one.
Yep.
You have St. Peter, you have the Catholics have all these saints that they pray to. That
Right.
to them, Catholics are the biggest group.
Yeah.
And they hear about it. So now they're hearing all that gods we have.
Right.
And there's one God.
Right.
You have Zeus and some.
Yep.
You have, the king that created all, but then you have all these lesser gods. To
Yeah.
them, Christianity is the same thing. It's just you have the archangels.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
And so, I mean, if you have a religion that's based on men, which Jesus was in flesh, I mean, I'm like you said, taking it from that perspective, and people literally worship the Virgin Mary. They pray to the Virgin Mary, and they have all their little stone God. How are we any different? How's Catholicism any different? Go ahead. That's good stuff. That's right. I mean,
Diana of the Ephesians.
Yeah. But when you look at it from that perspective, when we come in and try to teach, they go, well, how are we any different? Our gods, as Jay said, are higher than yours. You worship some that are human. And again, that's the fault of the Catholic Church, talking about saints and building cathedrals, name them after saints, and put their images out in front. And so African traditional, how you all a bit different than us? You do the same exact thing that we do, only our gods are up there and your gods are down here. We just have a little image that represents him, but your gods are all human. So Jesus was in flesh. So we got to say, well, he's fully God and fully man, but to explain that to someone who doesn't have a formal education, they're like, no, y'all have lesser gods. So, All right, that's all we got.
Picture of those skinny legs.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, we didn't get into all of them. Birth, initiation, marriage, death, sacrifice, some of the practices. Where's that? There's them drinking water, little boy. Look at these legs.
Wow.
So that's from a mission field. So, yep. Very sad. Yep. And we can't force the issue either. It's always, if you really loved your children, right? I mean, we're gonna send your $1.07 a month to, you know, whatever. Well, we say, well, if you really loved your kids, wouldn't you get them out of there? You know, if you loved your children, wouldn't you put them on a bus or a train or a ship or anything? Get them out of here. You know, don't look at that poor kid. I mean, he's a teenager raising kids. You know, his own brothers and sisters because his parents died of AIDS. You know, you think, why didn't they get him out of there? They're not going to do it.
One, why have 6 more?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you know, the more kids you have, the more in love you are with your God because He provides for you.
Speaking on that main thing, my dad had a saying, because I used to ask him, why are these people like that? He said, son, it's really simple. He said, you can take an African out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of the Russian.
Yeah.
It's just their genetic pool. It's just what it is. You can't change. You can't take them out of the Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. You may take them out, but they won't change.
Right. Yeah, you give them rice, they sell the rice. You know that they got to have. You know, sometimes it's very hard to understand unless even when we go there, it's hard to understand why they do the things they do.
Is that all you know?
Is that all I know? Yeah, that's all I know. What's Forrest Gump say? That's all I got to say about that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, that's all we got for today. I wanted to mention real quick that we do have the Lightpost app. I'm going to put a little sheet over here. So if you don't have this downloaded, it's got the church directory on it. We'll put in there from time to time. Request, you can drop it on there, but it's something you download for your phone and or Apple. If you need help, bring me your phone, I'll do it for you. And this will give you access to all the things that church related. I have mine on my homepage. So Lightpost. All right. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to get some donuts. We got donuts.
How you doing? Hey, I'm good. How are you?
How you doing?
I'll let you get by. Take me a little while.
Go, ma'am.
Hey, Carol.
Hey,
What's up, Frank? It's raining in here.
How you doing? Feeling good? Thank you. How you feeling? Glad you got the kitty back. You doing okay? Good. Baldwin County born and raised, right? One of 3. You're okay? Good. It's good to see you. Good to see you.
That's something new you're talking about.
Yeah, if you download this, it'll give you the full church directory, prayer list, and all that. Do you have that on your phone?
No.
Do you want me to hook you up?
And they can hear you.
Oh,
Happy anniversary.
thank you. Birthday. Yeah, I'm 48.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes me feel young.
You have that,
Yeah. Extra. Mm-hmm. If you got, actually, if you got your phone, I'll take a picture of it.
okay, sure.
And, yep, that's it. Install. It's free app. Send a picture of it to your phone. It's easier. What's your cell number?
941.
Send it to you in a picture form. There we go. All right, send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, I got it. I'll get it hooked up.
All right, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. How you doing, sir?
I guess the main thing I need is Christie's.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. You have unbelievable, researchable knowledge. You read all I've ever seen in my life. And you're talking about early in your lesson, you're talking about in the Sahara, you put up there farms and crops. So what crops, there's no water there.
Right.
Okay,
So
you
what
have my
crops,
cell number.
only kind of crop I can think that would grow without water is okra.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't.
What else?
I would think it has to be something that thrives in a dry climate.
It's gonna have to be
So,
something that's close to the ground.
right, yep, so it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be,
Peas and beans and
right, or
corn
peanuts or
and,
something like that.
yeah, maybe something
It
that
would be
would grow in the ground, maybe potatoes. You know, they
Yeah.
got a plant that comes up, but the potatoes are in the ground.
Right.
They grow down in the ground.
Yeah, and another thing they do have a lot of crops of is diamonds in Africa. In
Yeah.
South America as well, they're finding diamonds, so they have that as a crop technically, but there's not a lot you can grow.
I don't know what grows in there.
Yeah.
And the other thing I had never pictured was, when you showed the map of Africa up there, is Egypt being in the corner of Africa.
Yeah.
Never,
Yeah.
never in my life.
That's how close, that's how
When you
close
done
it
that, I
was.
thought, it's gotta be here somewhere, it's gotta be here somewhere.
I do now, they send me
Oh,
cards.
There it is.
There it is, yeah, and this little
Don't
part,
that beat off.
Egypt is this close to,
Yeah, yeah, you know, we study about Egypt.
yeah, this is Israel.
Yep, so we study about Egypt, Moses came out of Egypt,
Yep,
but I never pictured it being in the corner of Africa.
yep, it's an
And you
African.
put that map up there and I look,
Find out when they're gonna get.
wait a minute, it's in Africa, it's in the corner.
It is.
It's in the corner of the country of Africa. I never looked at that, never saw that.
That's why I like doing the graphing. Yep.
You just,
Oh, thank you. I love studying.
I just don't know.